Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's Omnibus edition. It is a bit of a shorter week because I've been really hectic. So hectic. I'm surprised I've actually managed to get anything done at all, to be honest. So enjoy what's there, I guess, and don't forget to hit that like button or share the video or subscribe to the channel. And if you do like what you're seeing, you can actually get early access to the videos if you're a paid subscriber. So maybe that's something to consider. You also get like super secret emojis, which only paid subscribers have, which is an interesting experience to discover those. Also, don't forget we're not doing live episodes at the moment because, again, super busy. We've got last week's interview with Shannon Halbert out now. You can watch that on the YouTube channel. And coming up this Friday night, we're going to have Wellington Mayor Tori Whanau joining us. We're going to have a discussion about the Golden Mile, and I'm kind of curious to find out her thoughts on those everyday average millionaires and billionaires calling themselves Vision for Wellington, that vision being 1993. Anyway, we'll worry about that later in the week. Sit down, enjoy this week's Omnibus, and I'll catch you at the other end. Hello there, kia ora. I just got back from the Big Day Out, the biggest event on the Tamaki Makaurau Pride calendar, after a weekend which saw some of the worst anti-rainbow actions from the dumbest, most indoctrinated Christian thugs in the country dominate our headlines. As you've probably heard, Destiny Church-linked thugs disrupted a drag storytime event in Te Atatu and the Pride Parade on Saturday. The violent nature of the Te Atatu event saw scared children, parents and centre staff barricaded in their room for safety. Now, there's no way this wasn't traumatic for those involved. And the whole thing, it was planned, and we know this because a Kuka media outlet was there in advance to record and stream the whole thing. And it's not a surprise. Brian Tamaki has been ramping up his imported culture war rhetoric recently, and last weekend he called for people to go to war and take action. On Sunday this week he was gloating about it and said that he called for them to storm the building. You know, the very definition of that highly illegal act known as inciting violence. And it has been universally decried. Chris Hipkins was really quick to comment about it. It took a while, but the Prime Minister eventually came out against the actions. The Free Speech Union came out against it. And Wayne Brown, the Mayor of Auckland, also did the same. So today, I wanted to know what was happening about it. Now, National and ACT didn't have a presence at the Big Gay Out, so I couldn't talk to them. But I did speak to Rainbow Affairs spokesperson for Labour, Shannon Halbert, and Green Party spokesperson for Rainbow and Takatapui issues, Benjamin Doyle, about this topic. Both have already spoken in the past with Police Minister Mark Mitchell about ensuring the safety of young people in the rainbow community, especially since the hateful rhetoric from the self-appointed bishop has been ramped up since, one of his own church leaders was convicted of the thing he keeps saying drag queens are doing, but there's never been any evidence to say that it actually happens. And he's been emboldened by the fact that he keeps getting away with his bullshit. The wet bus ticket slap for his attacks on rainbow crossings show this, and he's yet to go to court in the case of drag queens suing him for impacting their livelihoods. On top of that, Doyle has started communication with intelligence services to look at having Destiny-linked groups classified as a terror group, like Proud Boys is here. And there was talk amongst MPs from both parties about working to get the groups added to the list of gangs whose insignia and patches are now illegal in public. It's still a shitty law, but it's not changing anytime soon, so they figured that they should use it for some actual good instead of, just PR. On top of that, Auckland Council is also looking at hiring rules for locations. Currently, they can't turn down a location booking just because they don't like the person or the group making a booking. Did you know our new Race Relations Commissioner was actually part of the group who organised protests around those far-right commentators, Southern and Molyneux, to make sure that their councils couldn't do that with bookings. But there is provision about ensuring safety of people attending events on council facilities within the rules, and this sort of behaviour could be grounds for ensuring that no further bookings for Destiny-linked groups happen. It's still being looked at though, and it's still early days, so there's no definitive path ahead yet on this. Now for the really sucky part. The reason this rhetoric has been imported and makes an impact is because we do have a government that has elements within it that are susceptible to the rhetoric and use similar culture war talking points. They've been normalizing elements of this, and Tamaki and his minions are happy to use that. We've seen political appointments, like that Race Relations Commissioner I mentioned before, who worked to allow this kind of rhetoric that Tamaki and his ilk spout to be promoted. When parties like New Zealand First or the voters who complain to the National Party vilify trans people in amateur sport or demand the removal of RSE in schools because of bullshit that keeps their voting base angry based on no data whatsoever, and they have the power to influence policy or tear the government apart, it emboldens the people who think the sort of brutish, ugly actions that happened over the weekend are okay. We can clearly track how the anti vaccine and anti mandate movements have shifted its focus to rage farm over trans rights, and how they use that as a blanket approach to the rainbow community. We can clearly track how the rhetoric out of the US government is amplified in those groups around these issues. And we can clearly see how susceptible these people are to being sucked in and worked up. To these people, it doesn't matter that the police are on record as saying that there's never been a recorded incident of a trans person committing a violent crime in a bathroom or changing room, that the rainbow community still has some of the highest rates of hateful violence aimed at them, or the screeds of academic, peer reviewed research that's gone into seeing how difficult it is for many in the rainbow community to be accepted for who they are, because that's how indoctrination works. But there is some positive steps there that the public can take. Write to your local MPs or Police Minister Mark Mitchell and throw your support behind making the changes to the laws to add these thugs to the list of groups whose insignia gets banned. Well, maybe not if you're in Hamilton East. Your local MP actually got into politics because he was a member of Destiny Church. But you can always write to the police minister. It is high time that the actions of one loudmouth with way too much eyebrow pencil work was held to account for the actions that put people in harm's way. No one should be scared to be themselves, or to take kids to a community centre to hear a performer read kids' books. Hello there, kia ora. When I was last in Sydney, I caught an Uber where the driver claimed to be the man behind the 100% Pure New Zealand campaign. He spoke highly of how Jacinda had made the country a place people wanted to be in. He spoke in hushed terms about working with Helen Clark, and he spoke in very animated terms about how stupid our Prime Minister was for considering working with Winston Peters, and how he felt that it showed that Luxon was inexperienced and his government would suffer for it, with a range of self-created awkward moments and embarrassing walkbacks. Now, there's no way for me to prove that this was in fact the man who came up with that particular slogan, but he wasn't wrong on that last bit, and this weekend we got to see that in action again, with the launch of a frankly ridiculous campaign to get Australians here spending the tourism dollars. The goal's not ridiculous though, it's just how they've gone about it. They've created a new slogan, "Everyone must go." It reads like a school teacher loading kids up on a bus for a field trip and making sure that everyone goes to the wharipaku beforehand. I'm pretty sure with $500,000 I could have come up with something better. Hell, I might even just give it a shot at the end of this video to make it an uplifting ending for once. But paired with Stats NZ data released on Monday, well, it's just super awkward because 2024 saw our largest net loss of migrants over a calendar year ever recorded. A net loss of 47,000 people. That's more than the entire population of the Upper Hutt. In fact, total migration numbers show 72,000 people, or the equivalent of the Hibiscus Coast, left, while there are only 24,900 people come into the country, which is little more than the population of Masterton. It gives a new meaning to the phrase, "Everyone must go." Now, it should be noted that historic tracking on data migration flow is heavily skewed because of, COVID-19. And at the height of the pandemic, people were moving all around, and then there were some people who couldn't get in. So it's not exactly like comparing apples with apples in the numbers of arrivals and departures. So in 2023, for example, we actually saw a massive net migration gain of 128,000 people on the back of pandemic experiences. People, wanted change in the way that they lived, or there was a backlog of applications from people who didn't want to go through MIQ or from the previous couple of years. But these numbers are down on the long-term average of net migration gain between 2001 and 2019, which was 29,000. And there are some telling data here in the Stats NZ release, like the number of non-New Zealand citizens leaving is up 57%. A non-New Zealand citizen would include student visa holders, resident visa holders, or people on temporary work visas while they look for something more permanent. There's a strong indication that these are people who tried life here and it didn't deliver as expected, or those expectations changed so they felt that they needed to go elsewhere. Around 40% of those who left last year were also aged between 18 and 30, citing a dumpster economy, low wage growth, a lack of employment opportunities, a rising cost of living, and very little optimism for the future of the country here, with nearly 60% of all of those leaving heading to Australia, where they're going to be bombarded with images and ads from the government that cause the conditions that drove them away, saying that everyone must go, next to pretty pictures of our most pretty non-Lord of the Rings landscapes. And probably Hobbiton. It's even more poorly timed than the National Party MPs finding out this week that their dog whistles over the past 18 months are being heard by people who don't support them going to the Pride Parade because of woke and think that what Destiny did on the weekend was absolutely fine and they can't quite work out how that happened. Sorry, quick footnote that I'm going to put in here. What actually happened was there was a whole bunch of dog whistles during the election campaign, and the susceptibility of certain groups to disinformation and the way that they lack critical thinking skills that heard those dog whistles and expected you to agree with everything that they thought because you shared those dog whistles with racists, homophobic, misogynistic attention seekers to win their votes. According to the screeds of academic research on the topic that we tried to warn you about during the election when you stood on stage and said, I believe in one person, one vote when it comes to co-governance. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Sorry, I digress. Anyway, the country's created a perfect set of circumstances to drive people away, then has the audacity to think the way to fix things is a quick ad campaign in Australia, a digital nomad visa, and maybe more concerts at Eden Park, while fast-tracking projects that could lead to irreparable damage to the places that they're taking pretty pictures of for their tourism campaign, with the weird slogan. But at least I guess it'll remind people to go to the bathroom before a long trip. Hello there, kia ora. One of the most common questions I get every week is, what can we do about, all of whatever this is? And the answer is usually to make sure that you vote, make sure that you get involved in the democratic process through things like select committee or getting out and voting in local body elections, making sure that the people around you understand the impacts of the decisions that they make in government, and where possible, keep yourself informed because knowledge is power. But if you want to take it up a notch, now is kind of the time to do that. You see, this is the period in the political calendar where parties are gearing up for the next election. I mean, sure, it's at least 4 months away, but there's a lot of planning and prep that goes into it. For example, you might have noticed MPs are hinting at potential policy but avoiding detail. Sometimes they outright point out that the policy is still being finalised, and for each party, that process of finalising them is different, and then they have to announce them, and then they have to sell that policy to the public. Now, personally, I reckon Labour announcing their tax policy the same week that David Seymour takes over as Deputy Prime Minister would suck the oxygen out of his little promotion, especially if they announce a capital gains tax and use Christopher Luxon as an example as to why we need it. I mean, he's the best person on the planet for that right now. But that's not my call to make. The process for gearing up a party for an election is massive, and for some reason, the wealthy seem to pour their money into parties that make them wealthier, usually at the expense of the rest of us in some way. So these campaigns with less resources have to rely on more grassroots campaign styles, and they often can't pay for campaign experts the same way as the current coalition. Like when the National Party hired the world's most elite right-wing social media company run by former Young National Party members that once got into trouble for renaming the UK Conservative Twitter account into Fact Check UK in an effort to capitalise on a pre-existing follower audience while posing as independent fact-checkers during a televised leaders debate between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, where they spread disinformation about Corbyn's policies and the outcomes that they would lead to, and have been hired by multiple organisations multiple times to run disinformation campaigns to discredit people opposed to the major polluters, anti-cycling groups and organisations accessing NHS medical data for profit, that were hired by National at the last election to humanise Christopher Luxon and are now doing the same thing for Australia's unpopular, out-of-touch, bald Conservative leader, right down to the slogan. Anyway, a lot of these grassroots campaigns are kicking off right now across the country. Well, the planning stages anyway. There are a number of local chapter meetings going on where delegates and members start to hash out plans, look at candidate viability, and in some cases ask the only person in the room under the age of 50 if they know how to use the Facebook to get votes. And it's a great opportunity to get more involved in shaping the next election outcome if you've got the time to help. Now, everyone is going to have different views as to which party suits them best, but there's always a need for door knockers, event teams, social media management, and a huge range of other skills that every campaign needs. It can be a really good way to learn more about the communities around you that you might not be involved in directly and see firsthand the challenges for any MP in making sure their communities are represented and taken care of. So if this is something you might be keen to do to deal with, well, all of whatever this is, then check out your party of choice locally and see if they're after some help and support. And if not, remember that voting, getting involved in the democratic process in other ways, and letting others know how the government decisions are impacting you and your loved ones, that's still an incredibly powerful tool towards making the changes that you want to see. Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's The News. On Tuesday, ACT Party members of the Justice Select Committee decided not to attend the latest round of verbal submissions on their Treaty Principles Bill, citing more important things elsewhere. They were later found in the fetal position in a cupboard in their offices, crying about how mean the overwhelming number of speakers there were opposing the bill, and mumbling, "It's woke, it's all woke." Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown, seen here bringing a new meaning to the phrase "there's a code brown in the pool," has announced at the age of 79 his intention to run for a second term in this year's local body elections. When asked for comments, Aucklanders responded with, "Who? Postal ballot? What's a postal ballot? And there's an election this year again? What the hell?" Ex David Seymour and Simon Court, seen here next to two people who really should stop enabling them, have come under fire this week for uninformed sexist comments. Court used a select committee meeting to mansplain period cups, while Seymour claimed that the pay gap between genders was caused by the fact that men can work later to make sales while women have homely duties to deal with. Said Minister for Women's Affairs Judith Collins, seen here dreaming her reaction, "Oh sorry, I couldn't comment earlier, I was busy sharpening my knives." The first report into the efficacy of the boot camp program for young offenders is out, and Prime Minister Christopher Luxon says he is, quote, "really comfortable with the public not knowing the reoffending rates of those involved, which is understood to be around the 80% mark." The report criticised the lack of expertise in tikanga Māori in the course and low staff levels. When media asked if the reason he wouldn't comment on reoffending was because some cases were still before the judicial system, the Prime Minister, seen here unsuccessfully playing Got Your Nose with Simeon Brown, responded with, "Oh shoot, that is a good reason. Why didn't we think of that?" Winston Peters, seen here wondering why the cabinet room is mysteriously lacking the cabinets he left his whiskey behind in the 90s when he was fired by Jenny Shipley, has called a directive from the Director General of Health for some select population centres to add fluoride to their water supply a despotic Soviet-era disgrace, after Voices for Freedom linked Whangarei Mayor Vince Cocarillo, seen here being interviewed by Counterspin Media's Calvin Alp in front of a flag that should really be a lot more red, used his casting vote to refuse to follow the directive, potentially leaving the council and those who voted against the directive liable to legal ramifications, according to the council's CEO, as it's considered an offence under the Health Act to contravene a direction from the Director General. In response, New Zealand First has introduced a members' bill to allow councils to hold a referendum on the topic. The last time this occurred in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton in 2013, 68% of the population said, "Hey, why don't we listen to the experts on this one?" and voted to retain fluoridation. As of yet, no one has corrected Mr. Peters that Soviet-era Russian people did not have fluoride artificially added to their water supplies. School lunch provider Compass Group has admitted its halal meals are not certified as halal, instead calling them halal-friendly. Certification is given based on which foods are in the meal and how the meal is prepared. Compass claim that while they do use halal meat in their meals and follow health standards that match the Islamic requirements for meal preparation, they felt it was okay to tell people it was fine, even after halal-friendly meals arrive with decidedly not halal ham in it. We know we got this contract from a man who said it was fine to accept donations from a person who said he wanted to blow up mosque after mosque, but that's got nothing to do with our approach here. We simply don't know anyone in the Muslim community to approach to get this sorted. Numbers released by police internal magazine The Police News show that the number of police currently doing frontline work is lower than when the coalition agreed to increase the police force by 500. Associate Police Minister Casey Costello, seen here asking an RNZ reporter if they wanted to become a cop, stood by the claim that they will reach their target despite a decreasing base and fewer recruits than expected, and police being paid more in Australia, and police being forced to undertake a lot of unpopular policies for the look of it, like the gang patch ban, and the government ignoring police feedback on controversial issues like gun reform that would put them at risk. Said Costello, "It's clearly a mystery that we might never get to the bottom of." Shane Jones, seen here in his younger days as a protester wearing a shirt with the word Aotearoa on it, and Winston Peters, seen here needing to support himself on the podium because the rumours spinning, the Facebook comment section come to life that are the top 2 MPs for New Zealand First, once again attacked Green MP Ricardo Menendez-March, this time for being born overseas and daring to use the word Aotearoa in the House, despite the fact that using Te Reo Māori without a translation is permitted in the House. Speaker and former Te Reo Māori teacher Jerry Brownlee said instead he preferred the term Aotearoa New Zealand, while Menendez-March pointed out that on his way to the clouds he's always yelling at, our Foreign Affairs Minister clearly hasn't checked his passport recently, which states the name of the country as Aotearoa. In Wellington this week, the Michael Fowler Centre played host to Vision for Wellington's first public meeting to tell retirees why the common everyday millionaires and billionaires think their city needs more car park buildings, but are also totally non-political. Honest. Really. Vision for Wellington is made up of a number of what the press calls prominent Wellingtonians, which totally coincidentally includes the owner of the press and Wairarapa-based filmmaker James Cameron. They use the usual lines about bike lanes being bad and real vision of the 90s being needed, just not the specific real vision unveiled as part of the plans for the Golden Mile because there wasn't enough car park buildings. Of course, we all know that nothing bad ever comes from groups of entitled people telling us that their vision is the most important one to listen to. Police Minister Mark Mitchell, seen here asking a reporter if she's premenopausal before claiming there's no such thing as systemic bias against groups, like women, has been reported missing, presumed fed to sharks in very small pieces after Judith Collins was asked in the House about misogynistic comments Mitchell made on alternative media platform, The Platform. While Collins supported Mitchell's stance against gangs that aren't linked to churches that spread hate, she gave what can only be described as the look given to the game hunter, coincidentally named after former National Party Prime Minister Robert Muldoon in the original Jurassic Park, but with, sharper teeth. Police have asked if anyone knows Mitchell's whereabouts to please keep it to themselves until they've accepted that job offer that they just got from Queensland. Statistics New Zealand this week announced that the government failed to reach targets to reduce levels of material hardship for children. In fact, there was a slight increase in the number of children in low-income households. Advocates for children and poverty issues are understandably disappointed in these outcomes, even as the targets were reduced last year by the coalition, said Social Development Minister Louise Upson. "Oh, we were meant to work towards the targets." Yeah, I had no idea. How bad. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, seen here trying to connect with the little people, said in the House this week that growing inequality was a good thing. It showed people have ambition and should be celebrated. Said every community service provider in the country. What? Only someone wealthy and sorted who's entitled would say something so ridiculous. And finally, residents on Waiheke Island are asking visitors to the island to please stop feeding the sharks. Bronze whaler sharks, seen here learning that sharks have inbuilt receptors that allow them to sense electromagnetic fields, are a common sight in the waters around the island. Experts believe feeding them for show to get exciting photo opportunities increases the risk of one attacking a human. Said one resident, "Please, Judith, stop dumping the bodies here. There's plenty of other ways to get rid of misogynistic MPs." And that is this week's The News. Hey, thanks for checking out this week's Omnibus edition. As I said, it's a bit short and I do apologise for that. It has been, a bit of a busy, hectic, manic time, and it was my birthday and you didn't even know. I mean, to be fair, I don't tell anybody that. In fact, I'm guessing most people aren't even going to see this, so it's nothing to stress about. But don't forget, if you haven't already, you could hit that like, share, subscribe buttons, get people watching this stuff. And if you wanted previews, again, paid subscriber status will get you that. Until next week, look after yourself, be one with the force, live long, prosper, and all the rest of that. Ka kite anō. See you next time.
Is it secret? Is it safe?